Hey, Christ Church, Pastor Brady here. I have some exciting news. I am officially launching a podcast for you. I've been working on this idea for a little bit of time now. It started a couple years ago. I read this book called The Deconstruction of Christianity, and I really enjoyed that book. I think it's a well worth the time to read it. And one of the things they put forward in that book is that churches should do more open Q&As where people can ask questions and the pastor can answer and help facilitate those conversations. I was thinking about how can we do that at Christ Church, and I've been working on how do we do that at Christ Church. So I talked to the elders, and I've talked to a few people, I've talked to other pastors, and ultimately the idea that we have settled on and that I have settled on is a podcast and a video podcast. We will call this time every week. Quick question, Pastor. Just quick question, Pastor. My goal will be every Wednesday to upload a video answering some of the questions you might have. So, how do you ask questions? Well, that's a great question. We're off to a great start. Well, there's several ways you can ask your questions. First, you can submit one in the offering box. You can take a Connect card and write a question on that form and put it in the box, and I will try to get to it in that way. You can email me, you can text me, you can use the Google number that is in this link below as well. The only way to not submit a question for the podcast is as you're leaving on Sunday morning to look at me and be like, hey, for this week, can you answer the question? Da 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 da. If that's the way you ask me the question, there's a good chance I'm going to forget that question by the time I go around to recording this. Now, this podcast, I will say, is primarily for the people of Christ Church. Can other people submit questions? Of course. Maybe someone watches this eventually and they submit a question. But my primary focus, primary goal will be, as the pastor of Christ Church, to answer questions for the people of Christ Church. So, what kind of questions should you ask? Well, let's say you're listening to a sermon on Sunday morning and you have already read the passage that week. You got the email that gets sent out at the end of the week and you've been reading the passage, and there is a part of the passage you really hope I talk about. You have a question about it. And for some reason or the other, I just don't get to that specific point. I only have a specific amount of time in the mornings. We don't have hours and hours together. So I don't get to every single part of every single passage. In fact, I don't get to every single part of any passage. You can keep reading the Bible and learn more and more and more forever. Well, if I miss something that you would like me to address a little bit, you can ask that question. Let's say that while I'm preaching, you find something I say confusing or not clear. Well, you can ask that question as well. Feel free to reach out and say, hey, Brady, Pastor Brady, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you were saying, or you said this in a way that was a little bit confusing. Can you explain that a little bit more? I would love to help with that. Let's say your question's not about the sermon that week or the passage that week. You just have a general question about something you're reading in your own personal Bible time, or something you heard in a small group setting, or someone posted something to social media and you don't understand where they got that or if it's true. Feel free to reach out with those questions. I'm here to help answer any questions about faith and how do we live out our faith in Jesus in our modern world. I will try to answer as many questions as I can every week. My goal is not to ramble for hours and hours and hours and hours, although I probably could. I really want to keep the podcast to 30 to 45 minutes at most every week. And so there will be weeks, maybe there's only one or two questions submitted. That might be a shorter podcast week. There will be weeks where there might be 15 questions submitted and we don't get to every single one. Well, I won't just throw away the questions I don't get to. I will save them for a following week when we have time to get to those. Now, with this podcast, does that mean you and I still can't have a conversation? If you want to get together and have a cup of coffee or have lunch and have a dialogue back and forth about something you're struggling with the Bible or something like that, with faith, then sure, I would love to still get together. This in no way negates those times. If you want to ask me something even after church, you have a quick question that you just want to bounce off me, feel free to continue to do that. This podcast is sort of a way to have an open Q&A where we can ask whatever questions we want, and I will do my best to open scripture and find out what the Bible has to say about that question. Well, I hope I see you on Sunday, and I cannot wait to get this started. We are starting Colossians this week, and I really wanted to launch this as we started a new book, because Colossians, there's so much in Colossians, and I am really looking forward to diving into this book with you all, this amazing letter that Paul wrote, and I look forward to reading your questions. I'll see you all on Sunday.